Sarah Mitchell smoothed the pressed fabric of her dress blues one final time before stepping out of her rental car. The elegant stonework of Hillcrest Country Club rose before her, its manicured gardens and valet attendants a stark contrast to the military bases she'd called home for the past 18 months. Her dress uniform was the only formal attire she owned. Everything else remained packed in boxes at her parents' house, waiting for her to figure out where life would take her next. The weight of her service ribbons felt reassuring against her chest as she walked toward the rehearsal dinner. Emma had been her best friend since 3rd grade. Surely that counted for more than any awkwardness about her military service. They'd written letters throughout her deployment, and Emma had seemed proud when Sarah earned her communications specialist certification. The private dining room buzzed with laughter and clinking champagne glasses. Sarah spotted Emma immediately, radiant in a flowing pink dress, surrounded by women who looked like they'd stepped from a magazine spread. Their jewelry caught the light, their designer gowns flowed like water, and their laughter tinkled like wind chimes. Emma's voice carried across the room, but something in her tone made Sarah's stomach tighten. "Everyone, look who finally made it. My old friend Sarah, fresh from playing soldier overseas." The conversation stopped. Every perfectly made-up face turned toward Sarah, and she felt heat creep up her neck. Playing soldier, Emma's voice had carried the words like they tasted bitter. "Oh my God, is that a real uniform?" A blonde woman with tennis-tan skin looked Sarah up and down. "How intense. Do you always dress like you're going to war?" The group tittered. Sarah forced a smile. "It's my dress uniform. She thought she'd remind us all how important she is." Emma interrupted, her laugh sharp. "Sarah's been overseas for 18 months, saving the world one radio transmission at a time." More laughter. Sarah's chest tightened. This wasn't the Emma who'd cried when Sarah left for basic training, who'd promised to write every week. "Actually, Emma," a brunette with a Hermes bag chimed in, "didn't you tell us she got kicked out? What do they call it? Dishonorably discharged." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "That's not Emma, you know that's not true." Emma shrugged, sipping her champagne. "Oh, does it matter? The point is you're back now, trying to figure out what normal people do for work." She turned to her friends. "I've been showing everyone those hilarious photos she sent from overseas. The one where she's covered in mud? And those dramatic letters about serving her country, they're absolutely precious." The world tilted. Sarah's private letters, her photos from training exercises, shared as entertainment for these strangers who saw her service as a joke. The betrayal cut deeper than any enemy fire she'd faced. "Emma," Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Those were private." "Oh, sweetie," Emma's smile was knife-sharp now. "Nothing's really private between friends, is it? Besides, everyone needed a good laugh." She gestured grandly to the room. "Ladies, I think we should make a toast to old friendships and knowing when it's time to move on." The words hit like a physical blow. Emma raised her glass higher. "The truth is, Sarah, I only invited you tonight out of pity, for old time's sake. But looking around this room, seeing my real friends, my new life," Emma's eyes glittered with champagne and cruelty, "I think it's time you left. This isn't really your crowd, is it?" The silence stretched like a held breath. Sarah stood frozen in her uniform, her service medals suddenly feeling like targets painted on her chest, surrounded by laughter that had turned to whispered conversations and pitying looks. Sarah's legs carried her through the country club's marble foyer without conscious thought. The valet looked concerned as she stumbled past, but she couldn't form words. The cool evening air hit her face like a slap as she reached the parking lot, and only then did she realize tears were streaming down her cheeks. She leaned against her rental car, pressing her palms against the metal to ground herself. Inside, the party continued. She could hear the distant sound of laughter and music through the windows. Emma's laughter, probably. Emma, who had just eviscerated 18 years of friendship in front of a room full of strangers. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Hope the rehearsal is going well, honey. So proud of you in your uniform." The irony twisted in her chest like a knife. Sarah scrolled through her messages, looking for anything to make sense of what had just happened. She found the text thread with Emma from 6 months ago. Emma, can't wait for you to meet Marcus and all my new friends. They're going to love you. Sarah, hope I fit in with the country club crowd. Lol, Emma, don't be silly. You're my best friend. These people don't know what they're missing. Sarah stared at the screen. When had everything changed? She thought back to Emma's letters during her deployment. Letters that had grown shorter, less personal, more focused on Marcus and her new social circle. Letters that stopped mentioning their shared memories and started focusing on Emma's transformation into someone Sarah barely recognized. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. 3 weeks ago, Sarah had applied for a communications job at the local hospital. They'd been enthusiastic during the phone interview, practically offering her the position on the spot. Then, suddenly radio silence. When she'd called back, they'd been cold, professional, citing concerns about her background. Her landlord in her old apartment complex had called last month, confused. Someone called asking about you, Sarah. Said they were doing a reference check, but they seemed more interested in whether you'd had any problems. Legal troubles, that sort of thing. And David Morrison, the guy she'd gone to high school with who'd asked her out last week. He'd seemed excited about their coffee date, then canceled the day before. When she'd run into him at the grocery store, he'd been awkward, apologetic, muttering something about how he didn't want any drama, and that he'd heard some things. Sarah's hands shook as she opened her car door and sat in the driver's seat. Emma hadn't just humiliated her tonight, she'd been systematically destroying her reputation for months. Every job rejection, every social snub, every door that had closed in her face since she'd returned home. The girl who used to braid friendship bracelets with her during sleepovers had been methodically poisoning every aspect of her return to civilian life. Sarah closed her eyes and let the full weight of the betrayal wash over her. This wasn't impulsive cruelty born from champagne and peer pressure. This was calculated, deliberate. Emma had been planning this for months, maybe since she'd started dating Marcus and discovered his world of country clubs and trust funds. The worst part wasn't even the public humiliation, it was the realization that the Emma she'd loved, the Emma she'd written to from overseas, the Emma she'd trusted with her deepest fears and proudest moments, had never really existed. At least, not anymore. Sarah sat in her car for 20 minutes, letting the anger crystallize into something harder, more focused. She wiped her face, straightened her uniform, and started the engine. But instead of driving home to nurse her wounds, she found herself thinking about Marcus. During dinner, before Emma's friends had started their attack, Marcus had regaled the table with stories of his military service. Purple Heart recipient, he'd claimed. Served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic. He'd even rolled up his sleeve to show off a tattoo, an eagle with Semper Fi beneath it, which had struck Sarah as odd since that was a Marine motto and he'd claimed to be Army. At the time, she'd been too focused on fitting in to question the inconsistencies. Now, with military precision, she began cataloging every detail of his stories. The timeline didn't add up. He'd claimed to serve in Afghanistan in 2018, but also mentioned being at Fort Bragg during a specific training exercise she knew had happened in 2017. Small details, but the kind that mattered when you'd actually lived that life. Sarah pulled into a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee she didn't want. Her phone had excellent service and she had work to do. Her first call was to Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, her former communications supervisor who now worked in personnel verification. "Mitchell, how's civilian life treating you? Could be better, Sarge. I need a favor. Can you run a military service verification on someone?" Marcus James Whitmore claims Army service, Afghanistan deployment, Purple Heart. "You know I can't give you classified info, but I can tell you if someone's legit. What's this about? Just trust me on this one." 20 minutes later, Rodriguez called back. "Mitchell, there's no record of any Marcus James Whitmore serving in any branch of the military. Ever. If this guy's claiming service, he's stolen Valor, and that's a federal crime." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Can you document that? Officially, I can prepare a verification report." "But Sarah, what are you planning?" "Justice, Sarge. Just justice." Her second call was to Lieutenant Chen from her unit's intelligence division. "I need a background check run on someone. Financial records, criminal history, anything public. Marcus James Whitmore, age 32, lives in Millbrook Heights. This official business, personal." but important. While she waited, Sarah researched Marcus's family online. The Whitmore Foundation, a veterans charity started by his grandfather, a genuine WWE hero. Marcus served on the board, managed their fundraising efforts. Their latest tax filings were public record, and Sarah's communications training had taught her how to read between lines. Chen called back at midnight. "Your boy's interesting, Mitchell. Clean criminal record, but his financials are creative. Looks like he's been moving money around between personal accounts and the family charity. Nothing obviously illegal from what I can see, but the patterns are suspicious. You'd need an accountant to prove anything. What about employment history? Spotty. Lots of jobs in finance and fundraising, but never for long. Guy seems to jump ship right before companies downsize or investigate discrepancies." Sarah thanked Chen and made one more call to her college roommate Jessica, who'd become a forensic accountant for the FBI. "Jess, I need to understand how charity embezzlement works. Hypothetically." "Oh God, Sarah, please tell me you're not in financial trouble." "Not me. Someone else. Someone who might be stealing from a veterans charity." Jessica's tone sharpened. "That's serious. Federal crime serious. What do you know?" Sarah explained Marcus's role in the Whitmore Foundation and the suspicious financial patterns Chen had identified. Jessica walked her through what to look for: inflated expenses, fake vendor payments, personal purchases disguised as business expenses. "If you can get me documentation, I can analyze it." "But Sarah, if this guy is stealing from veterans," Jessica's voice carried the same protective edge Sarah had heard from her fellow service members. "That's not just theft, that's betraying everyone who served." By 2 a.m., Sarah had a plan. Marcus's stolen valor was documentable. Rodriguez could provide official verification of his lies. His financial crimes would take more work, but Jessica had given her a roadmap. The Whitmore Foundation's records were public, and Marcus's social media showed a lifestyle that didn't match his reported income. Most importantly, Sarah remembered something from dinner. Marcus had bragged about the foundation's upcoming audit, how proud he was that everything would be squeaky clean for the investigators. He'd seemed nervous beneath the bluster, and now Sarah understood why. She had less than 18 hours until the wedding ceremony. 18 hours to gather evidence that would expose Marcus as both a fraud and a thief. 18 hours to prepare a revelation that would destroy Emma's perfect day just as thoroughly as Emma had destroyed her life. Sarah drove home as the sun began to rise, no longer the broken woman who'd fled the rehearsal dinner. She was a soldier again, with a mission to complete. The wedding ceremony was everything Emma had dreamed of. White roses cascading from marble columns, 200 guests in designer attire, and a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon as she glided down the aisle. Sarah watched from the very back pew, having arrived just as the processional began. She wasn't alone this time. Master Sergeant Patricia Hayes sat beside her in full dress uniform, her chest heavy with ribbons that told the story of 3 deployments and 22 years of service. Sarah had called in every favor she had to get Hayes here. The woman was legendary in military circles, known for her zero-tolerance approach to stolen valor cases. "You sure about this, Mitchell?" Hayes whispered as Emma took her place at the altar. "Completely sure, Master Sergeant. The documentation is solid." Sarah's folder contained everything: Rodriguez's official service verification report, Jessica's preliminary financial analysis showing suspicious charity transactions, and printouts of Marcus's social media posts showing expensive purchases that didn't match his declared income. Most damning of all was a photo Marcus had posted of himself wearing military dress blues at a veterans gala, blues he had no right to wear. As the ceremony progressed, Sarah noticed Marcus growing increasingly agitated. His eyes kept darting toward the back of the church, and he was sweating despite the air conditioning. He'd spotted Hayes's uniform, seen the insignia that marked her as someone who would know a fraud when she saw one. Emma's friends from the rehearsal dinner sat in the front rows, occasionally glancing back at Sarah with smirks and whispered comments. The blonde who'd mocked her uniform the night before actually took out her phone, probably planning to document Sarah's pathetic attempt to get attention. Marcus stumbled over his vows twice, his voice cracking on the word honor. Emma squeezed his hands, mistaking his nervousness for wedding jitters, her smile radiant with triumph. This was her moment, the culmination of her transformation from small-town girl to society wife. When Reverend Williams reached the traditional words, Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. If anyone here has just cause why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence stretched like a held breath. Marcus's face had gone pale, beads of sweat visible on his forehead. He knew, somehow he knew what was coming. Sarah rose slowly, her dress blues pristine in the afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows. A murmur rippled through the congregation, gasps of surprise, Emma's friends' muffled laughter, and from Emma herself, a sharp intake of breath that sounded almost like a hiss. Reverend Williams, Sarah's voice carried clearly through the vaulted space, trained by years of military communication. I have information relevant to this union. Emma's face transformed, shock giving way to fury. Sarah, what are you? How dare you? Security. But Hayes was already standing, her uniform commanding immediate respect from the crowd. Even Emma's society friends fell silent when faced with the bearing of a career military officer. Ma'am, Hayes addressed Emma with crisp formality. We're here on official business. Stolen valor is a federal crime, and we have reason to believe this is my wedding. Emma's voice cracked with hysteria. You can't do this. Marcus, tell them about your service. Marcus had gone completely white now, his hands shaking as he reached for Emma's arm. Emma, maybe we should postpone. Postpone? Emma whirled on him, her veil catching on her tiara. Are you insane? Do you know how much this cost? How long I've planned? She stopped, really looking at Marcus for the first time, seeing the guilt written across his features. The wedding guests were buzzing now, phones coming out, murmured conversations growing louder. Emma's parents looked mortified, while Marcus's family, distinguished people who'd built their reputation on genuine military service and charity work, stared at their son with dawning horror. Emma's maid of honor, a perfectly coiffed brunette named Brittany, stood up from the front row. Emma, what is she talking about? Who are these people? Sit down, Brittany. Emma snapped, but her authority was crumbling. She looked around the church wildly, as if searching for an escape route, before her gaze landed back on Sarah with pure venom. You jealous pathetic, this is because of last night, isn't it? Because I told the truth about you. Sarah felt the familiar calm that came before a mission-critical moment. No, Emma, this is about truth. The real truth. Hayes stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded respect in war zones. Ladies and gentlemen, we have documented evidence that the groom has been falsely claiming military service, wearing unauthorized uniforms, and accepting honors he never earned. This is a federal crime known as stolen valor. The church erupted. Emma's scream of no pierced through the chaos as Marcus finally broke, pushing past the groomsmen and heading for the side exit. But he stopped when he saw two men in suits blocking his path. Federal investigators Hayes had arranged to be present. Emma stood alone at the altar, her perfect wedding dissolving into chaos around her, finally understanding that her world was about to collapse just as thoroughly as she'd tried to destroy Sarah's. Master Sergeant Hayes stepped into the center aisle, her voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention. The authority in her tone was absolute. Conversations died, phones lowered, and even Emma's hysterical sobbing quieted to ragged breathing. 200 wedding guests turned to face a woman whose ribbons told stories of sacrifice they couldn't imagine. My name is Master Sergeant Patricia Hayes, United States Army. I've served this country for 22 years, including 3 combat deployments. I'm here because someone has been dishonoring every man and woman who has ever worn the uniform. She gestured toward Marcus, who stood frozen between the altar and his blocked escape route. Marcus James Whitmore has never served one day in the United States military. Not one day, yet he has claimed to be a Purple Heart recipient, a combat medic, and a veteran of Afghanistan. Marcus's father, a distinguished man in his 70s who'd built the family foundation on his own WWEA service, rose shakily from his seat. That's impossible. Marcus has always the stories, sir, I have official documentation. Hayes held up Sarah's folder. Your son has never been enlisted in any branch of our armed forces. Every medal he claims, every story he tells, every time he wears a uniform, it's stolen valor and it's a federal crime. The church erupted again, but Hayes wasn't finished. Her voice rose above the chaos. But that's not all. Sarah stepped forward, her own voice steady despite her racing heart. Marcus hasn't just been stealing honor from veterans, he's been stealing money from them too. Emma's face went white. What are you talking about? Sarah opened the folder, pulling out Jessica's financial analysis. The Whitmore Foundation has been Marcus's personal piggy bank for years. Inflated catering expenses, fake vendor payments, personal vacations billed as charity work. He's embezzled over $200,000 from donations meant to help wounded veterans. Marcus's mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Marcus, tell them they're wrong. Tell them, but Marcus couldn't speak. He stood there sweating in his expensive tuxedo, the lies finally catching up to him. Behind him, the federal investigators moved closer. Emma whirled on him, her veil streaming behind her like battle flags. Marcus, say something, defend yourself. I can explain. Explain what? Sarah's voice carried across the silent church. Explain how you stole from veterans while pretending to be one. Explain how you built your entire relationship with Emma on lies. Emma's face transformed as the implications hit her. You knew? Marcus, did you know they would? Emma, you never meant to get caught. Emma's voice cracked like a whip. Oh my God, I defended you. I told everyone what a hero you were. She stopped, her gaze swinging to Sarah with sudden understanding. You knew, last night you already knew. Sarah nodded. I knew something was wrong when you shared my private letters for entertainment while praising his fake war stories. So I did what any good communications specialist does. I verified the intel. Emma's friends sat in stunned silence, their social media phones forgotten. The woman who'd mocked Sarah's uniform the night before stared in horror as the reality sank in. They'd been laughing at a real veteran while celebrating a fraud. The evidence is overwhelming, Hayes continued, pulling out printed photos. Social media posts showing Mr. Whitmore in unauthorized dress blues, claims of receiving medals that don't exist in his military record, because he has no military record. And financial documents showing systematic theft from a charity dedicated to helping the very people he's been impersonating. Marcus finally broke. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Emma, I love you. The money, I was going to pay it back. And the military stuff, people respected it, you know. Your friends, your family, they looked at me differently when they thought I was a hero. Emma stared at him in absolute horror. So you decided to become a fake one? While I was humiliating Sarah for her real service, the irony hung in the air like incense. Emma had destroyed Sarah's reputation while building her life around a man who'd stolen everything Sarah had genuinely earned. Mrs. Whitmore, sorry, Miss Preston, one of the federal investigators spoke up. We need to take Mr. Whitmore into custody. The charges include violations of the Stolen Valor Act and federal embezzlement. As they moved toward Marcus, Emma's composure finally shattered completely. No, you can't arrest him at my wedding. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Sarah felt a moment of something that might have been pity. Emma, there is no wedding. You can't marry someone who built your entire relationship on lies. Emma whirled on her, mascara streaming down her face, her perfect makeup ruined. This is all your fault. If you hadn't come here, if I hadn't what? Told the truth. Sarah's voice was calm, steady, like you told the truth about me being dishonorably discharged. Like you told the truth when you shared my private letters to make your friends laugh. The congregation watched in fascination and horror as Emma's world collapsed in real time. Her parents looked mortified, Marcus's family was in shock, and her society friends were already calculating how quickly they could distance themselves from the scandal. Marcus was led away in handcuffs, his expensive tuxedo wrinkled, his lies finally exposed. As the church doors closed behind him, Emma stood alone at the altar in her designer gown, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect day. The silence that followed was deafening. The aftermath unfolded like dominoes falling in slow motion. Within hours, Marcus was booked on federal charges, 3 counts of stolen valor and multiple counts of embezzlement totaling $247,000. The local news picked up the story by evening. Local man arrested at own wedding for impersonating veterans stealing from military charity. By morning it had gone national. Emma's society friends scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Their phones went straight to voicemail, their social media connections vanished overnight. The same people who'd mocked Sarah's genuine service were now desperate to avoid association with the scandal. Brittany, Emma's maid of honor, gave an interview claiming she'd always suspected something was off about Marcus. The Whitmore family moved quickly to salvage their foundation's reputation. Marcus's father held a press conference, his voice breaking as he announced his son's removal from all positions and their cooperation with federal investigators. "Our family has served this nation with honor for 3 generations," he said, his WW1 medals catching the camera lights. "My son's actions betray everything we stand for." But it was Emma's downfall that proved most complete. The country club where she'd held court revoked her membership, apparently being connected to federal crimes violated their character standards. Her job at the high-end boutique ended quietly. The owner couldn't risk the negative publicity. One by one, the doors that had opened for Emma Preston's society darling slammed shut for Emma Preston's scandal magnet. Sarah learned about Emma's fate through her mother, who still moved in their hometown's social circles. Emma had moved back in with her parents, her engagement ring pawned to help pay for a lawyer. The wedding dress hung in her childhood closet, a $8,000 reminder of dreams built on lies. "She asks about you sometimes," Sarah's mother said during their weekly phone call. "Wonders if you hate her." Sarah considered this from her new apartment in Denver, where she'd taken a position with a veterans advocacy organization. "I don't hate her, Mom. I don't know who she is anymore." The job had been offered after the story broke. Organizations across the country had reached out, impressed by Sarah's dedication to exposing fraud against veterans. Her military record, once questioned thanks to Emma's lies, was now publicly vindicated. Letters of recommendation poured in from fellow service members who'd read about her actions. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Emma stood on her doorstep, looking nothing like the woman who'd held court at the country club. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that reminded Sarah of their teenage years. "I know I have no right to be here," Emma said, her voice smaller than Sarah remembered. "But I needed to apologize. Really apologize, not just because everything fell apart." They sat in Sarah's sparse living room, the silence awkward with years of broken trust. "I don't understand how it happened," Emma continued. "How I became that person. When I met Marcus's friends, saw that world, I wanted to belong so badly, that I convinced myself you were holding me back. That your military service made me look small and provincial." Sarah studied her former friend's face, looking for traces of the girl who'd once promised they'd be friends forever. "So you tried to make me smaller instead." "Yes." Emma's voice broke. "And I nearly destroyed your life to build mine. Except my life was built on lies too, wasn't it? Marcus was lying, I was lying about who I wanted to be, and I dragged you down because facing the truth about myself was too hard." They sat in silence for a long moment. "The worst part," Emma whispered, "is that I knew Marcus was wrong about some of his stories. Little details that didn't add up. But I didn't want to look too closely, because then I'd have to admit I'd chosen a fake hero over a real friend." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "Emma, I need you to know something. I would have been happy for you. If Marcus had been real, if your happiness had been genuine, I would have celebrated with you, uniform and all." Emma's tears came then, quiet and steady. "I know, that's what makes it worse. You would have been the friend I needed, and instead I became the enemy you didn't deserve." When Emma left that afternoon, they didn't make promises about rebuilding their friendship. Too much had been broken, too much trust destroyed. But they'd found something like closure, an acknowledgement of what had been lost and why. Sarah threw herself into her new work, helping other veterans navigate the challenges of civilian life. She testified before Congress about stolen valor cases, her story becoming part of the push for stronger enforcement. The girl who'd been humiliated in a country club dining room became a national advocate for military honor. Marcus received 3 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution to the Whitmore Foundation. His case became a textbook example in stolen valor prosecutions. In prison interviews, he claimed he'd never meant to hurt anyone, he just wanted respect. The irony was lost on him. He'd destroyed his life trying to steal what Sarah had earned through genuine service. 6 months after the confrontation, Sarah received a letter from Emma. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in Oregon. Sarah, I got a job teaching elementary school in a small town where nobody knows my story. I'm not hiding exactly, but I'm starting over. Really starting over this time, not pretending to be someone I'm not. I see your interviews on the news sometimes. You look strong, purposeful, the way you always did in your uniform, but now the whole world can see it. I know I can't undo what I did. I know sorry isn't enough. But I want you to know that watching you stand up for the truth, even when it cost you everything, taught me what real courage looks like. It took me too long to learn the lesson, but I learned it. I hope someday you can forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours. You deserve to be free of the anger I caused. Emma. Sarah folded the letter and put it in her desk drawer. Forgiveness would come, eventually. She was learning that healing, like military service, required patience, discipline, and the courage to do what was right, even when it was hard. The girl who'd been laughed at in her dress uniform had become a woman who wore her honor like armor, not to protect herself from the world, but to protect the world from those who would dishonor the uniform she'd earned the right to wear. In the end, that was victory enough.